What does it take, financially, to run an effective nonprofit for the long haul? The full cost framework takes a holistic view of a nonprofit's needs, so both nonprofits and funders can orient funding decisions around long-term outcomes. And because our current funding structures are often shaped by the same disparities nonprofits seek to address, full cost is a critical framework for advancing equity in the nonprofit sector and beyond. The 6 components of full cost are total expenses, working capital, reserves, debt principal repayment, fixed asset additions, and change capital. All nonprofits need total expenses, working capital, and reserves, while only some nonprofits need debt principal repayment, fixed asset additions, and change capital. Let's learn more about each of these components. First, what all nonprofits need. Total expenses are the day-to-day expenses of running an organization. This includes direct or program costs, indirect or overhead costs, and unfunded expenses. When your nonprofit should do something that costs money but doesn't have the money to cover it, that's an unfunded expense. It's the difference between day-to-day spending and what it would take to do the current level of work in a way that's fair and reasonable. Unfunded expenses tend to show up in people costs. Sweat equity, overworking and underpaying staff, is the most common example. Total expenses include items like employee salaries, phone bills, legal fees, program supplies, measuring impact, and the depreciation of assets that may need future replacement. Working capital is the money needed to cover the predictable ebbs and flows of cash in the normal course of business. It is cash to keep operations going strong, even when we're waiting for payments from funders. How much working capital an organization needs can vary depending on your cash flow needs, when and how often money comes into the organization. You can think about working capital as you would your personal checking account. Organizations with sufficient working capital are able to pay bills on time, even through months when there are no cash receipts. If working capital is like a checking account, reserves are like a savings account. Reserves are savings that mitigate risk for organizations. The risk of losing revenue, the risk of unplanned expenses, the risk of trying something new, the risk that something may go wrong with the building or equipment, or the risk of an unforeseen event such as a pandemic. You can think of these reserves as an umbrella for a rainy day. An organization can set up board-designated reserves with certain conditions that can allow the organization to use reserves with board approval. Reserves are built slowly over time. Then, at a certain point, they're spent and begin again to replenish. You might use reserves to cover expenses as you test out a new program. If the program succeeds, you can use the impact data to encourage funders to invest in the new program so it becomes a regular part of your work. Next, what some nonprofits need. Debt principal repayment is the money used to pay down borrowings, like lines of credit, mortgages, and loans. Not all organizations have debt. When considering debt, it's important that leadership can articulate how current or future debt helps a nonprofit achieve its intended outcomes. This money usually comes from consistent surpluses, which determine how quickly outstanding debt can be repaid, depending on the amount and the needs of the organization. Fixed asset additions are dollars used to buy new equipment, furniture, leasehold improvements, or other fixed assets. This money is for purchasing new assets, not for replacing or maintaining existing fixed assets. Once an organization owns fixed assets, it will likely have a facility or equipment reserve to fund repairs or replacements. Finally, change capital is a large, periodic investment into a nonprofit to significantly change or build the organization. This could be to change the reach of the nonprofit's mission in terms of people served, geographies, or programs, or to change how it makes or spends its money. A change capital infusion should come with an investment in revenue-generating activities to properly structure the organization for its new business model. Change capital will cover the upfront costs of change and deficits until the new business model's revenue exceeds new expenses. Change capital is not just for larger, more established organizations. Smaller nonprofits benefit from change capital as well. Full cost requires that we think long-term and acknowledges that the needs of each nonprofit differ and change over time. Learn more with our full cost resources on nff.org.